Welcome back to You Can Homeschool. I'm Tracy Hagerman, the happy homeschooler, and I'm here once again with the lovely Pat Fenner from Breakthrough Homeschooling. Now, I don't know, listeners, if you are aware, but Pat is an author and she's written, I think, 4 books. And today we're going to talk about one of her first books that she wrote, which is a wonderful read. And so I wanted to ask Pat a little bit about her experience with that. The name of the book is called Celebrating the Passover, a guide for Christians to enjoy the feast.
Mhm.
And I had the lovely experience of reading that book recently and thought it would be great to talk to Pat about what was your inspiration to write this book?
Mhm. Well, it was actually it was actually pretty simple. The that was the first book I've ever written. It's really a very short read too. It's very practical. It's exactly what it says on the cover, a guide, and that's what it was meant to be. But our family has celebrated Passover. We are Christians, but we've celebrated Passover in my family of birth for many years, and then my current family. And when our kids were little, it was kind of a new thing to the our friends, and they would ask questions. We would invite them every year. We'd have some more different people over, and we'd involve friends and stuff as they grew. And they'd ask me questions about it. And yeah, how do we do this for ours? Would you come over and help me with this? And it was all like nuts and bolts kind of questions, like we want to do this. How do we do it? And my husband just said to me flippantly one time, he said, "Gosh, you should just put it in a book and give him the book, like it's." And I thought, well, that's not a bad idea. So I put the book together specifically for busy homeschool moms or moms just with children, that are busy. I mean, our friends were all homeschoolers, so that was the kind of the immediate audience. But it was just to help people get started, help busy moms get started with actually doing Passover. There's not a lot in it about like the history and the background and research and stuff like that. I do have links to resources if people wanted, chose to want to learn more. But it was supposed to be very easy to follow. This is what we do. And so that was really the point of, I didn't I didn't intend to write other books at the time. I didn't intend even to write that as a book. It was just like, oh, okay, let's try this.
So it sounds like it was a wonderful experience that your family had, and you want to share that with others through a guide to do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So so Passover, obviously, we read about in the Old Testament.
Mhm.
So why would Christians want to practice that or go through, set an evening aside to, reenact that?
Right. Well, Passover, as you mentioned, is from the Old Testament. It's a story from the Old Testament, and it is the story of how God delivered His people from slavery, from bondage with the Egyptians. It delineates miracles that happened, lessons they learned, things that happened. It talks about the plagues, even before they were um, enabled to leave Egypt, all the things that had to uh, that the Egyptians and certainly the Pharaoh, the kind of the head of the Egyptians, had to go through in order to let them to release them. And as a metaphor, certainly we are there are things that we as Christians today are held captive by. We have sins, we have lies that we tell ourselves. There are things that we need to be released from, that we are in bondage to. And so the metaphor certainly holds true today. The connection to Christianity, of course, is that when Jesus was on his way to the crucifixion and his supreme sacrifice for us as Christians, he was celebrating Passover. He was celebrating this ceremony with his disciples. So he was in the middle of telling them this story, or they were in the middle of working through this story about being released from bondage at the same time that Jesus was heading to the cross to release us from bondage. And so there's a huge connection there, and I know it's considered a Jewish holiday, but I get goosebumps thinking about the connections, not only to Christians in general, but to me personally, to my life today, and all that the Lord did for me and for us. And that it was spoken about or kind of foreshadowed, in ancient history in the Old Testament.
That's beautiful. And as we head into the Easter season, I think this is a key time to be thinking about what are the types of things that we want to study as homeschoolers
Mhm.
and relay to our kids. So I think this is just a beautiful exercise that can involve the whole family. Because when I was reading
Yeah.
your book, I was really impacted by, it was very step by step.
Mhm.
Explain exactly how, what needs to go on the table, what needs to go at each place setting. And I could visualize in my head how easily that would be to involve the kids, no matter what age they are.
Mhm.
So, did you find it required a lot of prep or purchasing special supplies?
Well, actually, the most prep that we did was the first couple of years when the kids were young. The Passover that we ended up, crafting for our family really came from a book of I can't remember the name of it. I'll leave the book in the show notes, and it is referred to in my book. But it's a book talking about the Jewish traditions and how Christians can celebrate them, and it's for kids. And so there are activities and games and all kinds of things that you can do in there. And we used it as part of our Bible study and ancient history studies in school, and walk through all that stuff. We cut out little frogs and hid them around the house and things like that. And so that was the biggest prep that I found was really spiritually, was preparing our hearts. As we got on to doing it over the years, there were certain things. There's a Seder plate that I wanted to get, that you don't have to get. It's a plate that has different areas for the different uh, items that you put on a plate that then father or the leader of the Seder talks about during the ceremony. And so we'd get something like that. But there were things that we did that enhanced it, that we wanted to, but they're definitely not things that you have to do. It's basically, it's a supper, but it's there are certain foods. It was the one time of year when I would serve lamb, because lamb's kind of pricey when you're on a single income. And our family loves lamb. So the kids loved doing Passover. Um, and but generally speaking, it was we made it special, and that so we did special preparations. But there were a lot of things we did that you don't have to do.
Right. So, as I was reading the book, I could really easily visualize the sort of the reenactment of the
Mhm.
Passover. And I like how your guide has, like the leader positioned to, someone can, it's, you don't have to second guess. You can just pick up the
Right.
book and without any prep, have someone in the leadership position, and then the kids having their various responses and that. So, love that part of it. I've always find for homeschooling moms, we don't have a lot of time for prep. It's like pick up and go.
Yep.
So,
Now, the one thing you would have to prep would be it's called the Haggadah, and it is this script pretty much that you follow to go through the ceremony. The whole ceremony includes readings and the dinner and the meal. And what we would do for that, there's a link I have in the book to a script that you can just download and print out, and everybody at the dinner table should have one, a copy of it. And then there's assigned reading. So you'll have, children will get to read something. I think there's, the leader, which would be usually the father, the head of the household. There's uh, readings for the mother. And then I think there's four other readers. And so everybody is very interactive. It's very engaging. You're following the script and, really realizing when you have something to say. So it really pulls people into the story and into the whole event.
okay. So tell us a little bit more about, you were talking about hiding frogs, paper frogs around the house. Tell us a little bit more for those who are unfamiliar with the celebration of Passover. Why are you hiding frogs around your house?
That's an excellent question. Well, we all know that homeschoolers are a little bit
Okay, other than that.
other than that, though, right? Well, there were plagues that happened that God sent to Pharaoh before to kind of, he was very hard-hearted, and he really didn't want to let God's people go. He liked having the slaves. They were very helpful to the economy, to what was going on. isn't that the same thing too, though, about a lot of our sins? They really don't want to let us go. And
Mm.
so anyway, uh, so the part of our studies, we're talking about the plagues. And what's really interesting, and we don't have time to go into this now, but the particular plagues that God chose all had to do with the the um, the very active gods that the Egyptians served. So and I don't remember all of the exact connections right here for now, but the gnats, the flies, the water turned to blood, the frogs was one of them, locusts, they were all had to do with gods that the Egyptians had. And basically what was happening was God was showing them, hey, there are no other gods, it's just me. And he had to craft situations for them to really see that it wasn't, these are not things, we should not be worshiping frogs. There's,
Yeah.
you know
Yes.
and so
Absolutely.
yeah.
So when you hide them around the house, so who's looking for them? Who's hiding them and who's going to find them?
Well, it was funny because we hid them, like we made a ton of paper frogs, and the reason the frogs stick out in my head is we hid them, and then when my husband came home one night, we looked for all the frogs. Now a lot of them were right in sight, because the place was covered with frogs in the
Yeah.
story. But my kids decided to be creative, and they stuck them like in drawers and under shelves and everything. And when we were moving out of our house, this was years later after we had done that activity, my husband was taking clothes out of his drawer, to pack up or whatever, and he found paper frogs in his drawer. It was like, why are these here? We did something with these a bunch of years ago, didn't we? And he's like, he found them in his clothes still. Our kids had hid things that well.
So it's the homeschooling exercise that keeps on giving.
That's right.
Okay. I'm trying to think. So for a homeschooling family, they're preparing for Easter and Holy Week and Good Friday and then Easter Sunday. So how can they incorporate this exercise along with everything else
Mm,
that all this the prep time and that happens with Easter?
right. Well, initially what we did when we first started doing this was we did it the week before Easter. So all the prep was over, by Easter week, and we focused on that. However, there was a time when our kids were little, that we got really just frustrated with the commercialism of Easter and Easter eggs and all that garbage. And so we sat down with the kids and we said, and I mean, some of them were young. We didn't even have, my youngest one wasn't even born when so they were like middle school and younger. And we asked them, how, listen, this is getting really kind of hard to do both for our family. What do you guys prefer? What do you want to do? And they were overwhelmingly Passover. We want to do Passover.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's not that we didn't celebrate Easter, but we didn't do the Easter egg hunts and the, candy kind of stuff and the Easter basket. We didn't even do Easter baskets, which they were really cool with. So, I wasn't being a bad mom,
Right, right.
but they really felt it. I think we don't give our kids sometimes enough credit, and they really understood and were beginning to understand the depth of Passover and the significance of it. And they became a little kind of dissatisfied too with the commercialism of Easter, realizing the background of Passover. So we
Mhm.
would still do, Holy Week and stuff with our church. And we got involved with our church when they had Easter activities, and certainly went to church on Sunday, but Easter Sunday, but we didn't, in our own family, the emphasis for us was on Passover. So you can, I do put that out there, that it is a viable option. You don't have to do both, or Passover, you can do Passover earlier, because like normally on the calendar, that's when it would fall, before Easter
Mhm.
anyway. Um, and just kind of minimize the commercialism of Easter. Like the Easter story is powerful, certainly, but and Passover is part of that, because, as I explained earlier, but our kids don't necessarily like, if we encourage the commercialism, the candy, the crassness, hey, they'll go with it, but they don't have to, like they might not, if you
Yes.
give them the option, if you give them, so
So it sounded like for your family, it became a beautiful tradition that the
mm,
kids look forward to. And like you said, as you're heading towards Easter, really help them focus on like, what does Easter even mean?
yeah,
Like, taking us, you know, the bondage that we have when we sin and without Christ and Christ's sacrifice, that there's no hope.
yeah,
And so I think that's beautiful, and I love, like you said, just the image of your kids running all over with the frogs, and I love that image. But aren't those the best moments
oh
when we
yes,
incorporate things with the family and also are enabled, in our homeschool too? Like I did primarily all the teaching.
mm-hmm.
So to be able to incorporate dad into, a tradition, I think that's just beautiful. And those are really the times I know in our family that when we're all together and maybe we were dressed up in costumes or special
Yeah,
dinners or whatever, those are the things that they absolutely remember
yeah.
the most.
There was a year that we made these big banners that we then hung up, as decoration, for years after that. And that was kind of like a creative kind of thing we did. We had a great time with that. We would make time to make different uh, centerpieces on the table. One year we made a lamb out of cotton, and uh, the kids would have, we had little lamb cutouts that were name place tags. So when we
Mm.
had guests and everything, we would have their name on it. We have a big Ziploc bag still of, because we'd save them. And it was a record of all the people we'd have had at our home over the years. And every
Oh,
time we'd have a new guest, we'd have to, oh, our daughter Lauren was kind of in charge of that. And I'd say, hey, don't forget, you have to do a lamb for so and so. And she knew what I was talking about. But I have to say that after all those years, the most gratifying thing for me, or a very gratifying thing for me, is that our oldest daughter now does this in her home,
oh,
and she invites her friends and she invites us, and so it's like kind of passing the mantle, over. And I love that it means something to them. And my other kids who, might not have their own homes yet or whatever, ask us every year still, where are we doing Passover? Where's Passover? And my that, okay, we have my daughter at home is the senior, but my other kids, they're all, in their 20s and older, and they still ask, "What are we doing Passover? Who's doing Passover?" And so I love that's something that really bonds us together as a family.
yeah, beautiful. And I know my first exposure, I've participated twice, was at a Bible study that I go to, Christian Bible study. And so they did, or we'd meet on Thursday mornings. And so they sort of did a reenactment with all the
Mhm.
special foods and the bitter herbs and all the things that you do. And that was really eye-opening for me because I heard of the Passover, I read about it, but it really made that story in the Bible come along, like come alive. And then the clear linkage to the coming of Christ and what he was, his whole purpose of coming was for. So that, again, getting back to, why would Christians want to practice this? I had no idea
Mhm.
of the significance of the Passover meal that we read about in the Bible. So that really eye opening. So I think your book is a wonderful, wonderful
Mm.
guide. It's a quick read. It's outlined very clearly. Like I said, it's pick up and go, pick up and do
Mhm.
it.
Right.
And I know, Pat, you've written a few other books, and that's what I find. I like the simplicity of how you write. It's anyone can pick it up and go
Mhm.
with it. So, anyways, I just really feel grateful to
Oh,
interview you about your book. And for our listeners, we'll put the link in the show notes of how you can get it on Amazon. You can get an e-copy or I believe a print copy.
mhm.
So is there anything else you wanted to tell us? Any last words about this particular book of yours, Pat, before we go?
Well, I just would want to encourage people to give that a try. And there are certainly, in addition to my book, there's resources online. If kind of, the book isn't expensive, but if you have to be a good steward of your funds, there's certainly things online that you can use to help you get going with it. But I just would encourage you to give that a try this year. Now that we're kind of allowed to be, to be congregating again from the pandemic, the recent pandemic. It's a wonderful way to celebrate that, and it's a definite a definite tool to deepen your faith and really bring home the message of Easter. It really is a connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's all we have for our listeners this week. So remember, you can homeschool, it can be awesome, and purchase Pat's book. You won't be disappointed. Have a great week.
All right. Take care, y'all.